Thank you, Kenny. I am Gary Kroger, and that is Kenny Seisler. We are the Gary and Kenny Show. Thank you for joining us. We're going to get right into our guest because we're very excited to have someone of this caliber on our modest little show. And he is none other than filmmaker Ed Zwick. Two-time Academy Award winner, two-time Golden Globe winner. His directing credits include Glory, which, by the way, is not on his IMDb page. No idea why.
Did you know that, Ed?
I did not.
Well, you know it now. But, I had to edit this list, and it's still a long list. Legends of the Fall, The Last Samurai, which, by the way, is one of my Desert Island films, Ed. Blood Diamond, Love and Other Drugs, Jack Reacher, Never Go Back. But I know, Ed, from many years ago, I auditioned for 30-something, the seminal television program that he created with Marshall Herskovitz.
Sounds like you didn't get it.
No, I did not. But we'll get into that. And once and again, his memoir, which is why he's graced us today, Hits, Flops, and Other Illusions, My 40-something Years in Show Business, was just released, and he's out plugging it, and we have read it, and it is fantastic. So please welcome. Ed, can I say Ed, or would you prefer Mr. Zwick?
Ed is fine.
Ed Zwick, ladies and gentlemen.
Ed, you're on this show because Mark Gordon is a very close friend of mine, and he asked you to do a favor to be on this show. Mark Gordon produced a movie called Saving Private Ryan.
Yep.
We just had the Oscars, and it has become customary with all the Oscars, it's not just who wins, but who got snubbed. So the New York Times did a list of the top 10 snubbed movies of all time.
Yeah.
And who got number one?
I don't know.
I'll tell you who got number one. The most snubbed movie of all time was Saving Private Ryan when it was beaten by Shakespeare in Love. Have you ever had this conversation with Mark?
No, I haven't. That's so funny. No, I have not. It's just so ridiculous. Mostly, we don't even remember who won the year before. In fact, I would challenge both to tell me, last year's winners in various categories. But the snubs, that's important somehow to remember.
That's exactly what's happened. Yeah.
I don't think I even mentioned in the intro that you, of course, produced Shakespeare in Love, which is a very interesting story in your book, by the way.
Yeah.
Ed, I got to ask you something right out of the bat, right out of the bat, because I've read your book, and you have what I think that I have in my little world, something called imposter syndrome. Because you constantly mention, I don't really belong here. David Lynch is editing downstairs. Why am I here? Am I good enough? You're interning for Woody Allen. And your modesty is very sincere, but it seems to be such an integral part of you. And therefore, I guess your creative process is sort of figuring, I'm lucky to be here as opposed to deserve to be here. How do you feel about that now?
I mean, I know that what has happened to me has exceeded any sort of childish expectations. In fact, not that I necessarily had those childish expectations. I had imagined a couple of other things might happen to me in my life and career, and this just evolved. I don't know. It's conceivable that it's false modesty too. I mean, I think that when you write a book, that you create a persona, and it's possible really that is the voice that came out of that character that was me in that book. I mean, I do know that I have been daunted by the amazing quality and talents of the people who have surrounded me from the time I was very, very young. And I couldn't be anything else but humble in their presence, because I learned so much and just persisted in asking stupid and just utterly intemperate and presumptuous questions of people who were good enough to answer and teach me. So I know that I've been a student the whole time.
Yeah.
but there
I'll
had
tell
to
you,
be.
your book, I'd be honest with you. I think that if I had read your book when I was just starting out, I might have thought twice about getting into the business.
Well,
And
you
the
know,
reason I say that, I'll tell you
why do you
why.
say that?
Because, and this kind of goes back to even the title of the book. The why is because it's a hard business.
yeah, yeah.
Every movie's a battle. I mean, I feel like
I
saying, Ed, thank you for your service to go out there and do these battles to make these great movies.
Well, do you know anybody who has managed to survive in this business that has not been smacked and that has not been scarred or marked by it in some way?
No, I absolutely, but the thing is,
It's defined by
after being in the
rejection.
business,
I mean, it's of course it's that way.
I know, but it's not that way when you're a little kid growing up. When you're a little kid growing up and dreaming of being in the business, like you talk about hits, flops, and other illusions. I think the other illusion that I had probably growing up was that the business was going to be fun. Everybody looked like they were having a
Well,
good time.
well, hang on. It is
Okay,
fun. It
right.
manages to be both. I mean, it's conceivable that something is two things at once because it's unbelievable opportunity and it is blessing and pleasure and real fun, along with devastating disappointment, along with sort of crushing rejection and extended periods of boredom. So it's everything because it's because it's defined by people.
Yeah.
It's not governed by some empirical understanding of the
Right.
product or some measure by which things are judged. It's got this X factor of people and their egos and their talents and their fears, and it all is sort of put together in this cauldron, and the cauldron changes every time depending on the personalities involved, the location, the stakes, the money. It's this organic, really difficult to define thing because it's all about this ineffable thing called a story. What
Yeah.
is a story? That's at the center of it, and it's you can't put your finger on it.
Which brings me to 30 something. All right.
Right.
I'm going to circle back here because 30 some, well, first of all, I'm an actor in Hollywood, or I was, many years ago. And Tim Busfield and I auditioned for a couple of shows, a show called Spies and a show called 30 something. And I went in and read for you, Ed. And what I recall is that you were very nice to me.
That's
You
good
were
to know.
you were very, and that's the fun side of it because I love to audition. That was the
Mhm.
fun side. Anyway, Tim and I auditioned. We went to Network. We tested for Spies with George Hamilton. We both wanted it desperately. I got it. And Tim came up to me and said, "You know what? You deserve it. You're going to be great." And my philosophy is, Tim said, something better always comes along. Well, got to a few weeks later, Spies is already canceled, and Tim gets this thing called 30 something. And it, of
Yeah.
course, goes on to be, and I want to say this because I was an actor auditioning for cop shows and medical dramas. That was the entire landscape. And suddenly there was this
Oh,
show about me, about relationships, about real people.
I mean, first thing to say, Tim Busfield was the first person who walked in and who got the voice.
Yeah.
I mean, we had written this thing that was written differently, and it was about a very different, very personal voice. And he was the person that really let us know that it was going to work because everybody who had come in was doing too much, was selling it, was
Me,
trying to
me. I
color
was
it.
one of those. I can admit,
No
I can
names,
admit it. It
no,
must have
No
been
no
me.
names,
names. No names.
no names at all. But Tim came in there and he threw it away. He just let it happen. And Marshall and I turned to each other after he walked out and went, well, okay, well, he's in it. And please, God, let everybody else find it. And there were not many people at that moment who could, because television was so different then. Television was so much on the word. It was so presentational and
Yes.
performative. And that was a very important moment for us, actually, when Timmy walked in.
So I want to get back to the book because the book really started, from what I understand, you were about to do the 30 something reunion movie.
Yeah, we
And
had
then COVID hit.
we were
30
we were
something else, was that the title?
yeah,
Oh yeah,
we
30
were
something else.
we were 1 day away from shooting, and COVID, New York shut down. Everything was canceled, and that was its demise so far. And the premise of the show was that our children are now that age. And
Right.
the idea of we being parents of children that age was a very interesting thing to look at and talk about, as we
Do you
did.
think it possibly will be you don't know?
We have tried a couple of times. It's come close. I don't know why necessarily it hasn't happened, but it hasn't.
Okay,
And
so you write the book. You write the
yeah,
book.
yeah,
So you produce, you directed, you've written, then you write a book. Now you gotta promote the book. How
yeah,
is
yeah.
this whole promotion? Are you comfortable with having these conversations with everybody? And well,
Yeah.
what's this experience been like?
I've often felt when I've gone off, I've done tours, obviously, with movie stars and selling a movie. And the hard part of that is that you see these journalists in these junkets, and they all ask you the same question every 5 minutes, and your answers become canned, and you take the truth of things and then you turn them into little falsehoods. You turn them into pretty little lies, right? It's different with this because, first of all, people who read books are different than people who just see movies. People who see movies, they look at a movie and they go, "Oh yeah, I saw that. What's for dinner?" But people who read books they take that book to bed with them. They live with it
Yeah,
for a
yeah,
week
yeah, yeah,
or whatever. It's a much more intimate reaction.
yeah.
And the way that I've sold this book has been with people like you guys who are really thoughtful and want to talk about different things. And by and large, the conversations have been interesting. And every now and then there's just that stupid, what's it like to work with Tom Cruise?
Yeah, right.
He
Right.
does
Kenny,
his own
scratch that
stuff.
question off your list.
No,
Yeah,
I'm still going to ask it. But Ed, and then I found out about the book because my son, who's a manager in the business, he was not reading your book, but listening to your book. You had to do an audio book. So not only do you have to write the book, but you had to read the book out
You
loud.
have to read the book out loud.
I mean, I'm not an actor, and I try to make that clear in the book, actually. It was hard. It was 6 hours a day for like 6 days.
Wow.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's a challenge.
Is
The
a
funny thing,
director there? Is a director there going,
Oh,
Ed,
yes.
could you
yeah,
do
well,
it?
actually, there's a love. Yes, there was they do have a director, and it's good that they do because these people are real thoughtful about how you do it. I had the funny experience. I did a Q&A with Liev at the 92nd Street Y, and we've become friends now. We've done a few things together, and it was a lovely, lovely conversation. But at one point, he said, I wanted to read something from the book. You wrote this about trying to act, and he said, I'm just going to read it to the audience, and he killed it.
Of course he did. He's the greatest voiceover in history.
He's such a ham, and he's wonderfully comedic, and the audience is in stitches. And I'm thinking to myself, schmuck, why didn't you ask Liev to read the book? There is the performance.
Well, my son gave you a great review. He said it was fantastic. So,
that's
now,
cool.
what do you read on? I read on a Kindle. Now, my wife will only read a real book.
No, I only read. I tend to read real books. I don't like the Kindle for
Me
some
too.
reason. It's that
Me
feel
too.
in my hand. My wife reads the Kindle all night long.
Well, the reason I like the Kindle, and especially for your book, and I know you froze here, but we'll have you back in a minute.
He's unfrozen.
Okay,
I'm back.
is first of all, you have an unbelievable vocabulary. And the great thing about your Kindle is that if you touch the word, the definition comes up. And I was touching a lot of words in your book, just so you know.
And I want to bring this back to me.
Yeah, of course.
Early in the book, you talk about your experience with Woody Allen as an intern. And by the way, when I was a young man, I had a VHS of Love and Death. And if I was interested in a girl, if she didn't think that was the funniest movie ever, she was gone.
That was it.
Seriously.
Yeah.
So to hear the insider's view, but this is the perspective that really got me. because I am reading your book, hearing my voice. And that's why I brought up imposter syndrome and things like of your humility. And when you asked Woody Allen questions, and you said he graciously gave me the time and answered things, but you'd ask some questions and he would admit, I don't know. I've got great people around me and I trust my cinematographer. I trust my gaffer. I trust these people. You don't, your conclusion was you don't have to know everything to get started.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I had been daunted. There was a kind of weird division when I was in college between those who were the sort of theater kids and those who were the visual studies, the movie kids. And there was a kind of mutual resentment or contempt even between those two groups, I found. And because I really couldn't thread a Bolex, and because I'd not spent a lot of time with a moviola, and I mean I'd done a little bit of stuff, but not anything substantive. And similarly, neither had they been working in the theater. I had assumed that that was going to be not somehow part of my life, that I was denied it, or that I was not going to be capable of it, and so it was somehow technical in a way that I didn't understand. And this revealed the ludicrousness of that argument. It revealed that all that it was really about was storytelling, it was collaboration, it was communication, it was working with actors. It was exactly like the theater. You just had to understand it was a different medium by which those things happened. And the penny dropped. It just became clear to me, and it was things he said, but it was more about what I was able to observe. I mean, he was busy directing a movie, but I was sitting there watching. And the funny thing is, when you're on a set and it's so fucking boring, you don't even realize what it is you're learning until later when you're in the middle of it and say, "Oh, I remember I remember an AD once saying to me, here's what you got to understand: when you see everybody standing around on a movie set, that somewhere one person is literally killing themselves to do something, and you don't know it, but they're going to die if they don't get it done quick." And it was about trying to figure out the mechanisms by which things happen. That was the most interesting part.
Mm-hmm. Well, I want to go back to the thing you said about story, because it is the one driving force that is the motivation to get this thing up on the screen, to tell the story. Everybody's read an article or heard or had somebody said, "Oh my God, this would make a great story." But the thing about it is, you can actually read a story and go, I'm going to write a movie about this story. That's particular. So I imagine there's a lot of people that will come up to you and go, "Ed, I just read this story." Do you get that a lot?
Yeah, I do.
And when you get that, what is it? Is there the one thing that you go, you know what?
It's the hardest thing to even talk about, because it is ineffable. I mean, certain stories have within them the shape that is classic. Certain stories have within them a beginning, a middle, and an end that you can somehow see out of the mist. Certain stories have within them characters that are so undeniably interesting, or their arc of character is so interesting. But I have that same envy for these guys who write books like Michael Lewis or David Gran. They look at a what seems to be a subject of not obvious narrative. You think of Moneyball, right? And you say, a story about statistics in baseball, like what? Or you look at David Grant, you look at the Killer of the Flower Moon, or you look at or The Wager, the new one, and you say, oh my God, he found within that this thing. He grasped onto this thread and was able to pull it. And I think that it is a minor talent, but an important one, to be able to identify what that is. And it's also personal. One thing that interests me is not going to interest somebody else, and vice versa.
Now, will you? I don't, suppose it depends on who's actually telling you the story, but generally, if somebody goes, Ed, I got to tell you the story, you go, you know what? I don't want to hear the story. Is that, or you'll just sit there politely and listen to the whole thing?
You try to be polite. It tends to happen more with, someone sending you a script or a book,
Yeah,
or
yeah, yeah.
it's not as much somebody buttonholing you at a cocktail party.
Oh,
Well,
because I get that a lot. I get it from my family. Your family always comes up to you, go, you should do a
Oh,
sitcom about my office.
because I was on SNL, the
Yeah,
banker says, "Oh, you should do a skit on
yeah.
bankers." But Ed, this all makes sense, and of course, it's in your book. And I keep one of driving people to hits, flops, and other illusions. My 40-something years in show business. Which is available, by the way, everywhere, right? Amazon. I mean, let's
Oh yeah.
plug it periodically. It's everywhere. Hits,
I will.
flops, and
I
other
will add.
illusions.
We've made the New York Times bestseller list for the second week now, so we're doing.
Congratulations, and it deserves it. But all of this going from 30-something into About Last Night makes sense. That seems like a smooth transition, a relationship
Yeah,
comedy. Was it a smooth transition? Did that make sense?
yeah. In fact, although it's a little bit out of order in the book, they actually About Last Night preceded 30-something, and I think it influenced it. But the leap that you're about to describe is the jump to glory, because
Yes, that is
that is the
correct.
thing that seems very much, if you were trying to make a list, it seemed out of context. And all I can say two things. One of which is that my interest and Marshall's interest in the epic has pre-existed any of those things. That goes back to being 12 and 13 and 14, and whether it's looking at Lawrence of Arabia or reading the Iliad, or any of those Shakespearean tragedies, any of those things that were of epic reach had always interested us. So that pre-existed all of this, because in 30-something we always said we were interested in what was epic in the small private lives. So that word epic was always there. But the other thing, the reason that I was able to make Glory, I think, had to do with shooting television. It had to do with shooting 40 hours of a television show. Because when you look back at the early movies of John Ford and George Stevens and everybody, they had all done two-reelers. They had done Mack Sennett comedies. They'd done Harold Lloyd comedies. They had shot film. They had shot film and film and film and film and film. And it doesn't matter what its subject was. It didn't matter what its genre was. It was about this feeling of confidence and mastery that telling a story was telling a story, whatever its nature was. And so, yeah, it was a big leap to try to get into the scale
Right.
that Glory was. But it was finally the biggest little
Right.
movie that one
The
ever
biggest
made.
little movie. Yeah.
Because I had a wonderful production designer a little bit later, but worked with her several times, and her name was Lily Kilver. She's really, famous in the business. And she used to talk about the veal chop theory, that when you order a veal chop in a restaurant, it comes and you look at it and it's bigger than your head, and you say, how am I ever going to eat that? And she said, what you do is you take your knife and fork and you cut a little piece of that veal chop, and you eat it and you chew it up, and it's good. And then you do another little piece. And after a certain period of time, that veal chop gets a little bit more smaller and manageable, and you're digesting it. And you don't do things all at once. It's incremental. You
True,
take
but
them.
isn't somebody standing there with a stopwatch going, you only have a certain amount of time to eat this
Yes, but
veal
but
chop?
that also, believe it or not, that also gets to television. You learn how long it takes to move a wall. You learn
Yeah.
how long it takes to get an actor out of makeup if it's a hair and makeup deal. You learn about, yeah, but then again, I hired a guy named Skip Cosper, who is an AD. Skip he had done Deliverance, he'd done Days of Heaven, he had done Westerns. He knew how long it took to get horses turned around and saddled up, and he knew what it was to, fix weapons and deal with safety rehearsals and set off mortars. I mean, I relied on his expertise and his knowledge to help me through this.
Well, that goes back to your lesson from Woody Allen, then, doesn't it?
Right, but I'm surprised that even the studio, when that script about the Civil War and that particular event, the studio really thought that was going to be a small movie.
Well, Freddie Fields was the producer, and was a legendary handler. He was wonderfully adroit at sort of going through those. It
was a salesman, so he sold it to them as a small movie.
And he sold them the idea that it was about. I remember the phrase he used. He said, "It's going to be like Platoon."
Right. Okay. Yeah.
This regiment, these guys. It's not the regiment. It's about this group of guys in the war.
Right.
Except he didn't sort of add the fact that the group was about 700 or 800.
So in the book, and you start off and you say that you're going to just tell the stories as they are, and some people it's flattering, and some people it's not so flattering. Which in Glory, obviously, I don't know where she is or whatever, but Matthew Broderick's mother didn't come across in the best light.
Yeah, sure I have. Mostly good, some of them very funny. I would say there were a couple of conversations where some people seemed a little bit aggrieved, but not in a way that was furious, just questioning what my choices might have been in saying, emphasizing one thing rather than another, or the order in which I told things. But it prompted good conversations. There are a couple of people I've not heard from that I'm surprised not to have heard from.
Right.
But then again, maybe there was some omerta, some unspoken omerta that you're not supposed to talk about certain things and certain people, and I violated that, I suppose, in certain people's.
You made that very clear in the preface of your book. That, there's going to be some name dropping because there are names that are there.
Here's what I think was maybe unique about the book. And that was my determination to be authentic.
Yeah.
And that's, by the way, that's also why I had loved Bill Goldman's book, because Bill Goldman literally said, nobody knows anything, and here's how it is. And he was funny about it, but he was telling truths. And I just, with that exception, there had not been one that I had read in a very long time from the inside that was really trying to talk about what it was.
Yeah, and I don't think it was that you were saying that the people were bad as much as the process is a difficult process.
Yeah. There are 3 movies that I would take to a desert island if I could, several movies. If I had to choose 3 epics, they would be El Cid, Last of the Mohicans, and The Last Samurai. Because they are truly epic stories that could be, but mythical yet real times in history. I am so seduced by The Last Samurai. I don't even know where my question is going to lie in this statement.
Oh, this is my Tom Cruise question.
I love the texture that you created, the mythology that you forwarded so deeply that the film actually relaxes me. Even the bloody battle scene, it centers me somehow. And now I'm sounding like an old hippie,
that's interesting. I think there are 2 things about that. I actually had a wonderful professor, actually, of Shakespeare, who said that the key to tragedy is that it is the most restful. And that because we know that where it's leading, that it confirms something of our own understanding of life, that it leads toward the end of something. And so I think in our minds to some degree, I mean, listen, I was working with John Logan as we created it, and John Logan is a wonderful storyteller of a very particular kind. He's very literate, but he also really has a feel for what is historically important and interesting in terms of cultural understanding and the curve of history. And we talked a lot about transitional moments in history, because you feel the world changing around you. and that world changing was around Ken Watanabe's character. It was around Tom
Exactly.
Cruise's character. It was around Japan. It was about
Yes.
weapons. It was about war. It had all this transitional stuff. So it felt like there was something that you were a party to. But I also think that there was an extraordinary amount of attention by Nyla Dixon in the costumes, but Lily Kilbert in the sets,
Yes.
to the armorers,
Yes.
I worked with Japanese translators and people who really understood the culture, that we tried to not just make an American movie or a Japanese movie, but we tried to make
Right.
something that was happening.
An immersion. It was an immersion for me.
That's right.
Whenever I watched the film,
That's
I'm
right.
there. So Tom Cruise, is he always in a good mood?
No, no, but that was my going to be. That's all I wanted to know because, boy, he sounds like he really, he loves making movies.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And it's funny that that's a hard thing to describe. There's an old joke, and you as an actor will like it. Somebody once said, "How do you make an actor miserable?" And the answer is cast him.
Mm.
Because there are a lot of actors who just don't love the process, who go into such a place of personal pain and personal struggle that they leach all the joy out of the process.
Yeah.
There are other actors who come alive and who appreciate the privilege of it and the blessing of it. And there are things about Tom that are very unusual and some controversial, but in terms of the work and the process, it is unbelievably positive and forward looking and joyous.
And of course, you
Yeah.
worked with him again in Jack Reacher.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the real sign is if you see repeat business by by an actor and a director, by a DP and a director, by that tends to be the giveaway.
Yeah. I wasn't as successful as I would have liked to have been. I certainly didn't go out there to be a C-level actor. But at the same time, even though there was so much disappointment, et cetera, I loved every opportunity I got to audition. I literally
You love the honey
couldn't
wagon.
wait to audition. Couldn't
By
wait
the way,
to show that room what I could do.
If I say one thing to actors, I would say that to them. I say, in fact, your life, the thing that is most fun should be auditioning, because shooting sometimes is a drag. You're sitting around for hours at a time waiting to act for 38 seconds. And maybe your day is to act for 5 minutes. But when you audition, you are ready for a part. You're doing it. And I also think that the key for an actor is to make it okay to be rejected, is to go in there with an attitude that says, this is fun. I'm here to have fun with you. Because what you don't realize, what actors should realize, is in the anxiety that exists on the other part of the desk, on the other side. These people are sitting there saying, oh shit, the script doesn't work. We're not going to find somebody. What's going to happen? And you're going to leave and go off and go to Starbucks and then go to the gym and whatever else you're doing. And you're going to leave those people in that room with their anxiety and their fear about going to make the movie. And I think there has to be some understanding that if you make their life a little bit more pleasant, they're also, particularly the casting director, is going to want to have you back.
That's right. Well, I used to say the only reason I booked jobs was so that I could afford to audition, because that's what my career was ultimately. Yeah. And again, you were an excellent person to audition for. Good. I believe you and Marshall were both in the room. It was a room full of people, and we were there, a familiar casting director. But that was the job. I loved it.
Yeah, but I mean, it goes without saying. Obviously, the dramatic shift in movie making today is incredible. I mean, so quickly from COVID now to be, it's like, going out to a movie and what movies are successful. I'm going to ask you this. You seem like an honest man, but so the Oscars just happened. Um, I thought Oppenheimer was fantastic, but I will say this: I was shocked that Barbie was nominated for Academy Awards.
Was nominated.
Was
Is that what you
nominated.
said? Yeah.
Well, I
Yeah.
mean, I think that there's one moment in the book where I just make a list arbitrarily of the movies that I liked in 1976 or 77, those movies that were so fundamentally important to me when I first came to LA. And I stopped at about 13 or 14, but there could have been 25. And it was very hard for me in the Academy this year to pick 10 that I thought should be nominated. And of those, maybe I picked 5 or 6, of which a couple were foreign movies.
Right.
That's it all, doesn't it?
Well, hey, I have a very pedestrian question, and we're being very respectful of your time and very aware of that.
Okay.
We're pushing on that hour there.
Give us the finger when you want to go.
Okay.
I have a very pedestrian question.
Okay.
We're always, okay, did one film snub another? We're always talking about snub, actors getting snubbed. Is there such a thing as being snubbed? I mean,
No.
was Thomas Dewey snubbed by Truman? I mean, people vote and there's a
No,
result.
also, I would say to you, is there such a thing as being able to compare one piece of art with another?
Right.
You began talking about Mark and Saving Private Ryan. How do you talk about Saving Private Ryan and Shakespeare in Love even in the same conversation? They literally are like chalk and cheese. You're trying to you're all that's like saying, oh, that we're all alike because we're all human.
Right.
It's clickbait. It's complete clickbait. That's the world we
Yeah,
live in.
that's
Is
right.
that you say,
And by
and
the
I
way,
got to tell you, when I looked up Ed Zwick, all of the headlines were clickbait. Ed Zwick says Brad Pitt is difficult to work for. Those are all the things
and by the
that's
way,
out there.
what happens in is that Oscars were invented as clickbait. The Oscars
That's
were
right.
created by the Motion Picture Association to try to sell movies.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. That's the purpose. It's not to judge movies. It's and everything in America is a contest of trying to who's number one, who's making the most money, who's at the top of the who's going to make it to the playoffs. It's that same competitive notion of what is better. And I think it could be fun, it could be boring when you're in it, and it could be secretly validating because you too have bought into it from the time you were really little and watched it in your pajamas at home and think that it's important, but it's not.
But there's the existential question. Does it continue the way it is? Or because we're having these conversations about being snubbed and why are we comparing movies to each other when they're completely different? Does it end? Do the Academy Awards have a shelf life? Are they going to be 10 years gone?
Well,
is there any way to predict this?
You have to ask a different question. What is the fate of movies?
Yeah, that's
I
really
think, I mean, the Academy Awards are a barnacle on the whale that is movies.
exactly.
I've got to see, does the whale.
There's your clickbait. There's your clickbait. Ed Zwick says movies are a barnacle on the whale. Oh,
No, the Oscars are
the Oscars are a barnacle. Okay.
Right.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I totally interrupted.
What's going to become of movies? Clearly its role in the culture has been diminished when you compare it to games, when you compare it to YouTube and everything else that in the world around it. Where will it land? Will it become quaint opera? Will it be this rarefied little thing for people who can afford to go to a hard ticket, movie theater? I don't know.
Yeah, no, we don't know. And the other thing is the way technology changes the way we watch things. You can watch an entire movie on your phone. And the other day, I was actually in Best Buy and I put on that ProVision thing from Apple.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And they do show like a little scene from a movie. And it's like, wow, it's incredibly immersive. So as a filmmaker now, I mean, you're really going to have to combine these code writers and the artificial intelligence people are going to be creating this new immersive media. And that's going to be, I mean, it's going to be so
Yeah.
fragmented
Well,
that like where people watch and get their content.
Also, what will that young director, that young writer take from that experience if he comes to understand experience to be singular in an immersive experience like that? How will it affect what he writes and what he does? Because it's going to.
And yeah, and it's like comedy too. Like watching a comedy in a movie theater is so different than when just sitting in your room by yourself and watching a comedy.
Yeah.
You
I
know?
mean, I can laugh a little bit when I'm watching a movie by myself, but not the way that I laugh when I'm in a movie theater and
I
I'm part
know.
of this
Well,
I
experience.
know.
speaking of the future, can there be a memoirs too? I mean, can there be hits, flops, and things I forgot? I mean, seriously, you're a success and you're on the bestseller list. Do you stop? I know you have more stories.
Well, he
I
doesn't.
don't,
He's a workaholic. He
You
says so in his
are.
book.
I don't know if I have them about this. There are some real stories that I have forgotten, and it's kind of, it was very hand to mouth as I wrote it. I don't think I have enough
You know what? I'm going to make a prediction. You
okay.
are wrong about yourself because I know something about people who are obsessed with working, who are obsessed with creating, who can't turn it off. You're
Right.
going to find the reflection inside of the things that you
Right.
didn't think of in the first book. And
Have
you
you
go,
thought about doing
hey.
TikTok, Ed? Have you thought about doing TikTok? A lot of people are doing TikTok. Hey, I got a question for you. Are you taking
Yeah.
questions?
It's your
Hey,
last question,
so
Kenneth, because we're at an hour.
I went to NYU Film School. Back in those days, you went to USC or NYU. That's how I met Mark, by the way. And it was expensive, $8,000 a year, but that was my entree. I had no connection to the film business other than my mother went to high school with Buddy Hackett. That was it. So my only entree was I got into NYU Film School, and that really was by getting to know all the people, and it was an introduction to the film business, whatever. I really believed that it was a great thing to go to film school. But now film school is $50,000-$60,000 a year. And
Yeah.
content is being created on the phones. I don't know whether I would say to somebody, yeah, mortgage your house so that they could go to film school.
I would say that it's one reason why, I mean, I am on the board of the American Film Institute, and every hour that we spend is trying to increase the amount of scholarships available, because I agree with you in that regard. I would say that every moment of being on the board of the American Film Institute is trying to figure out how to get more money for scholarships, because we don't want the storytellers who we're training only to be the children of privilege or to be so riddled by debt that becomes their motivation in doing what they do.
Right.
So yes, I think that's a very legitimate observation about how we're going to train the next generation of filmmakers and what they're going to care about.
Yeah.
We want their concerns to be uninhibited by money. Although this is a business dictated by money, it's an art that is dictated by financial concerns, and that's always been that way. And that's one of the issues right now of these multinational corporations owning studios and not wanting to do those things that are necessarily confrontive or disruptive or challenging for an audience, but only to favor the profit motive.
Right.
And that's about educating an audience, because the less we do that, the less they want it, and there's I think we've seen the results of it already these 10 years, and I think we're only going to see it more.
Yeah. Well, I got to say, Ed, I'm so glad that this book has brought us together, because I have been
Yes,
such a fan.
absolutely.
You really have made remarkable movies.
Yeah.
Congratulations on some of the films that you have made. You're writing. That's the other thing. You're a writer and director, and
that's why I know there's another book. That's why I know. The book is hip. Hits, Flops, and Other Illusions, my 40-something, nice pun, by the way, years in show business by Ed Zwick, available everywhere, Amazon, New York Times bestseller list. Go out and get it. I believe that with this transition in how we entertain ourselves, going back to books is going to be a renaissance. I think that we're going to start reading again. At least I hope. A thoroughly enjoyable book. And it doesn't matter if you're in the business, have been in the business, curious about the business, or in fact, if you're just kind of interested in life, it's a fascinating journey.
Or if you want to know about Matthew Broderick's mother.
Yes. Plenty of salacious material with no intention of being salacious. It's a wonderful book. One last thing, Ed, should I just give up any hope of being called back for 30-something? Has that ship sailed?
The sequel, he might go in development on the sequel.
The question is, should I give up any hope of actually rebooting it? So we'll see.
Well, find a part for Animated Neighbor.
Well, at this point, Gary, you'd have to be in the movie 70 or something.
Exactly.
No, I'm 67 in a couple of weeks.
Okay.
I'm not 70-something.
I apologize for that.
Ed, thank you so much for your time, for gracing us. It's been just a wonderful conversation.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye,
See you
Ed.
later. I'm just so flattered that we got to talk to Ed Zwick. Because, even when you're in the business, Kenny, there is a rapture that you get when you're talking to one of the people whose names you see, an Ed Zwick film.
Well,
Mark Gordon is like that.
To be honest with you, when I see a lot of them, when I watch movies today, and there's certain movies you sit down and you go, I have no idea how they did that. And I'm in the business, and I go,
yeah, I know.
How did they do that? That's amazing. And it's kind of like, I guess a magician being impressed by another magician. So when I watch his movies, I go, wow, that's better than I would have done.
I keep going back to Glory and The Last Samurai. How do you direct an epic like that? Because cue the actors in back with the cannons. Send in the smoke machines.
You really, it really.
Cue the horses.
I don't know, and I didn't. But the truth of the matter is, I think that I didn't go into the feature film business because I was lazy. Because when I was at NYU Film School, and we were making movies, and each one of us was responsible for making our own film. I remember Mark making a movie, and we all worked on each other's movies. So I would hold a light or do the audio or whatever, and the camera, whatever. But you'd be up all night long in somebody's apartment, the whole night.
Right.
And there was no food or whatever. It was just student films, and you were just suffering, and no air conditioning. And this is fucking horrible. And then I got cast in somebody's television productions thing. I think I told you the story because I was also in acting. And I went over to the television studio and was like, wow, this is nice. It's air conditioned.
Yeah, right.
A lot of cameras.
Yeah.
It was indoors.
Well, the directors.
So I stayed in that world because the other one just looked so hard to me.
Well, it's interesting. It's interesting because, as an actor and the opportunities that I would get in television shows and things, Ed is right. You're basically sitting there in your chair waiting for the 7 to 8 seconds where you get to do something, and you do it in increments like that. But the director always has to be aware of what are these people doing? What's next? What did we just do? How much time did that take? Looking at the performances. I mean, it's consuming occupation.
It is consuming, but and Ed points it out in his book, is that, you used to have to put together an army of people in a movie to show an army of people. You don't have to
now,
do that.
Right.
Technology.
I wonder if he would have done Last Samurai now very differently with green screens and things like that. Well, okay, that's interesting. Kenny, we are out of time. Ed was a wonderful entire episode.
I thought so.
And so I'm just going to say goodbye to you and to our listener viewers.
Are you going to tell them about...
Yes, I'm going to tell. First of all, thank you for watching the Gary and Kenny Show. Thank you for watching with our very special guest, Ed Zwick. His book, Hits, Flops, and Other Illusions, My 40-Something Career in Show Business, is available everywhere. Fascinating read. Please join us any old time you want the Gary and Kenny Show. Go to YouTube. We've got the Gary and Kenny Show channel. We are on DBTV, streaming television. and we're heard on all the popular podcast platforms.
And they must like and subscribe.
Yes, like and subscribe.
Like and
That's
subscribe.
just a nice thing for us.
Yes.
So anyway, thank you so much, and we will
Okay.
see you next time. And Kenny, I look forward to seeing you again. I am off to do some promotion as Dean Martin for the Rat Pack Lounge, in which I am starring locally. How was that for a plug?
Well, congratulations to you. I have nothing else to do today.
All right.
Okay.
Kenny, have a
Bye-bye.
good day. Bye-bye.